We're going to do some modeling in this one. I'm going to show you how I cut out all these different shapes and details on these types of objects. It's really quite easy using a lot of standard modeling tools like knife, inset, extrusion, but also using add-ons like machine tools and punch it, things like that. So you'll see along the way on how I do this, but this really comes from a question that I got from someone, should they use a panel generator? And look, panel generators, if you can use them and put them to use on your objects, then use them. There's nothing wrong with that. But every now and then you're going to want to have more bespoke details on surfaces. And the panel generator won't do that for you. So you have to learn to do this at some point. And it's good to know these types of modeling tools anyways, because you're going to use them all the time when modeling anything. So it's not just to do detail like this necessarily, right? Like it's a knife tool. Knife tool you use all the time. So, but yeah, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and just jump into this. I'm going to do a new cube. And we're going to more or less make a similar form here. And we'll get to it. Extrude that out. One of these is beveled and one of these is not. And so we get that kind of basic primitive shape. And that's what we want really to start working. It really becomes part design and part ability to model, right? You have to know what kind of shapes to cut and what kind of details you can place when and where. That's all on the design side of it. Now, using the tools to make that happen is the modeling side of it, right? So that's where you run into a lot of trouble. If you're not strong with the tools, it's going to be harder even if you were strong with design. Now, if you're strong with the tools but not with design, you're still going to have a hard time. So you got to actually practice both of them. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of go in a vicious circle and do a lot of repetitive stuff, basically. But for the most part, you kind of start with something big like this, and then you can work in like secondary details. So let's just actually, let's pull this down so it's not in alignment with those, and we can see it a little bit easier maybe. All right. So knife tool, K key. You can customize this. So this is where you want to go to preferences, key map, look for the knife tool, and under, you'll see it here, like we get this K key, right? Knife tool. Set it to angle and 5. That's what I use in all my videos for the most part. And you can customize the knife tool. You can customize like bevel, for example, if you want. Change bevel to do maybe one segment and an outer emitter arc. That's really good as well because chamfers are really important here. And if you have something like mesh machine add-on, you can turn chamfers into bevels later on using the fuse feature. So you grab something like that and just be like fuse, boom. So chamfers are really, really important to this process potentially. And then using the knife tool as well. So KCA now we'll do knife cuts like this, and we can, cut out different designs, right? But if, we're not sure exactly what we're trying to do or create, the designs could look really bad. I would recommend looking at like user interfaces, user interface design, because what happens there is they create a lot of really cool shapes you can use on hard surface detail, perhaps. Okay, so I just did that and it did this because I got eye on. I got to turn that off. So default behavior, you should just be able to hold control and push that in a little bit. You don't have to go too crazy with it. And then you can scale it maybe on Y if you need something like that. Maybe you chamfer something like this. If we're creating triangles and bad topo, it's not really the end of the world, but you do want to be a little bit careful with what you're doing because you will end up with like weird non-planar areas or like weird face alignments that just don't work for you maybe. A lot of times I eyeball things. I like to think of creating hard surface objects as almost like creating fonts or graphic designs. Like I know what I want here, like this overhangs and I don't really want that. So I'm going to cut it all off and then delete it. Something like that maybe. And then I can take this whole section, alt click it and press F and then do that, right? Just get a big N-gon going. Not even a big deal. So it's all flush now. And so we can, start working booleans into this. We can do box cutter, hard ops. We could do just knife cuts all over the place. We can do mesh cuts as well, or boolean knife cuts. It's kind of the same thing. So let me place my 3D cursor over here, select the object. So when we create a new cube, we'll get this going. But like if we took a bunch of boxes, for example, and we just started laying them out like this and creating a little bit of pattern to them, perhaps different shapes. If they intersect with each other, doesn't matter right yet because we're going to do them one at a time. But just to give you an idea on how this could potentially work out, maybe we run this one all the way down. Okay. And we can use Machine Tools Mesh Cut. We select one, shift select that. We right click Machine Tool Mesh Cut. That's the same as like a knife cut. But basically it imprints the borders onto the mesh here. So it does like a knife cut almost with it, right? Really useful. We can also use hard ops to do this. We can select one, select the other, hit Shift Q and use knife cut here. And by default, it should be doing the cut, but you still have the cutter left over. This is useful sometimes because you might be cutting multiple objects with the same cutter. So if you want to use that one, you could. In our case, we're not, so we're going to get rid of it. And we'll do another mesh cut on this. So a lot of times I end up going with mesh cut. This starts to develop that paneling effect that you were probably looking for, right? If you're very careful with it, you can create some really cool kind of panel details and whatnot. And you just take a big cube, for example, and just like run it. I don't know, like right here, maybe try to align these perhaps, and then mesh cut it, right? You can see if we mesh cut there, we could shift this edge now, but like because we went over this angle, we can't really shift this one quite around where we would want it. So lining things up can be super important to get right before you do any kind of booleans. Those are technically booleans is why I'm talking about it like that. But so you could always use snapping, right? Vertex snapping, super useful. Grab all of those bottom vertices. You can hit like G and Z and snap it to that vertex. Okay. And so now it'll be in alignment. We don't have to worry about it. We could just go through there and whoop, let's get that 3D cursor back where it goes and mesh cut it. Boom. All right. So that'll work out much better that way. And then later on over here, we can decide if we want to keep this or not. Maybe we don't. We just get rid of it and start merging things out wherever we see fit, right? Maybe add some, press 2 with machine tools. You can do a join or J. So you can do things like that. Learn those shortcuts, those hotkeys, do symmetrize with mesh machine, et cetera, et cetera. Not really a beginner tutorial necessarily, but you combo all those standard modeling tools together with those other tools and you have a much better time. So you have to spend time learning those. I know when you're doing the basics with them, like you're just now like picking them up and starting to learn them, it can be really irritating, really frustrating because you're not sure what to press and when and where and how to pick up speed and all that. Speed comes with practice. That's all it comes down to. And then knowing those tools like KCA, being able to press that real quick or jump in Alt-Z with the X-ray, move things around. And if you want to create, you know, very unique pieces in here, like you can do that, but it's hard to like line things up sometimes. So a Boolean could be useful perhaps, but sometimes you might start on an edge and then just press like X or, and Z in our case won't work here. We press A twice. That does an angle relative. When you do A twice and we can do 90 degrees, right? And then we should be able to bring it all the way back if we needed to on X. So you can switch those modes up with the knife cut as well. You can bevel a vertex by hitting Control B and V to do that. Or you can hit Control Shift B, or you can do, you can press 1 with machine tools when you have a vertex selected like that. So you can do things like that perhaps. Maybe want to knock those in. So you're kind of prepping like what you want to have happen before you actually do all of it necessarily. Not to say that you won't just come in here at some point and say like you want to just extrude. Like it comes up at an angle with that extrusion. Extrude it on Y and then do it a little bit different, you know. Switch these little tools and techniques up and then maybe add a chamfer here. Just do a little bevel like that without the vertices. You could do the vertices too if you really wanted to, but not on this setup right now. Maybe in the back corner or something. We could have got away with that earlier. You could do, usually that's a big secondary shape, I would say, but we're not there now. So, all right, but yeah, we cut that out. Okay. You know, at any point we can go back in and say like, we just want to chamfer something. Maybe we chamfer these two, right? You see, like they don't quite look right. This is where I compare doing these types of shapes as doing like graphic design or fonts less than modeling. Because you want things to be in alignment. You want them to look good. And in our case, that just does not look very good. And maybe we can work it out and make it look a little nicer, you see? So that's the trick you're probably running into, or the problem you're running into that you don't really have to, or you can't get around anyways. And so the trick is to just take your time and do it manually, right? Eyeball it, you know, don't be afraid of eyeballing things. Like this here, I think it would look good pushed in, but maybe I don't want all of that exactly like that. Maybe I GG twice it up or something, or chamfer it, or maybe I do that at the top, who knows? Maybe I could just add a loop cut in here, or I could just do a knife cut perhaps. Whoops, not far enough, get rid of that vertex. Maybe I do that, and then I just extrude it a little bit further, and I get a different kind of result, you see? So little things like that go a long, long, long way, especially when you start wrapping your knife cuts over surfaces. So for example, This is very narrow here. I don't think it's, or suspect that this is the right place to do it. But if we line them up just the way we want, we can create really interesting patterns if we slow down and take our time with it and try to straighten things up and all that other fun stuff. Because now we can create sort of like a panel here, right? Use the cursor selector with C. And then if we wanted to, we can inset and hold control and we'll get it out like that. Or you can inset, hold control, let go of control and let it pull in a little bit. So we'll get a little bit of a taper to that, which is good for baking if you're doing normal maps. Okay. You see like right here, it's like kind of a similar idea. And this is what I was talking about, pulling those over the areas anyways. Is like, this is working fairly good, I would say. I'm going to cut here to, yeah, all the way down to here. We're going to skip those middle ones. And now we can maybe cut something a little bit different in here, perhaps. You see, I cut that one and it goes crazy. Sometimes that happens. Just kind of ignore it for a second. Cut the rest of the vertices that you want. It's because I think shift, when you hold shift, it cuts to the center of the edge. I think that's what happened there. So all we can do is align with machine tools real quick. Fix that out. I'm going to symmetrize it. So when we do this now, maybe this whole section. This could be a little bit, sometimes it doesn't work the way you expect it to. Let's just put it that way. Because if I inset and hold control, like it's doing exactly what I thought it was going to do up here. It's getting a little squirrely. Sometimes you have to manually fix those. Sometimes you need to try offset even on or edge rail. And if those don't fix it, then do it manually. So like we know what we're trying to go for here, but it just didn't quite work out. And it's a little unfortunate. I think this whole edge, I'm just going to flatten for a moment to the left. And then this one here, because I was trying to match that other side there. And we didn't quite get it. So what we could do is we can vertex snap as well. Let's say G Shift X, and you can see we're going to go on the two axes. So G Shift X and hold control and snap that one. Then we can take maybe this one all the way down and then do a G Shift X and G Shift X and snap that one. And then this one as well. So those little tricks like that go a long way as well. Just snapping on two axes at the same time could be quite good. And really what we're looking at, I guess, is this one is not quite where it needs to be. G Shift Y in our case. Okay, yeah, so we're going to want to run this probably further forward. GZ, snap, and then we can G, Y, snap. Yeah, there we go. So we can fix things like that as well. So your standard modeling tools, guys, super useful. I'm going to hit C to, because otherwise when we bevel, we get this. You hit C, it clamps it, and that should help that out a little bit. All right. And little by little, you will go through this whole shape, and you will do this one after the other, basically. And sometimes you got to cut the shapes out. Sometimes you don't. I just need another shape in here, perhaps. You can see it's trying to snap, which is a little bit of a problem, maybe. So that whole section, if I straightened it up a little bit better, would be pretty much good to go. We could extrude it. This piece down here, let's flatten this one down, straighten that out real quick. We could take this, flatten it down, and then snap it to be even with that one. Okay. Now, if we ever did something like extrude manifold, we could take something like this, and if we Alt-E, we can extrude manifold, and usually we can push it through like that and click, and we get something like this. Problem with extrude manifold, though, is that it doesn't go through the next edge or the whole object. So you need to use like a Boolean extrusion. And Blender doesn't have that by default. They're supposed to add it at some point, but until then, you can use Machine Tools add-on. It has Punch It included with it with the Deus Ex version of Machine Tools. You can use Punch It. Punch It's really great because that's what it does. It does a Boolean extrusion, so you can hold Control, align it to an edge, send it all the way through. If you have little weird discrepancies, you can hit W to push and pull the final result here, so it inflates the mesh a little bit. And you can do that, or you can hit Control W. So W or Control W. W is going to be like by 1, and Control W is by 100. Sometimes it's faster, so you can just do Control W. Shift W will get rid of 1, and Control Shift W will get rid of 1. So it's a pretty easy system to use. And once you've done it, it's a Boolean, so you need to clean the mesh up. Just grab it all, hit 3 with Machine Tools. It'll merge by distance and do all of its cleanup features. And but we can start chiseling away into the silhouette if we needed to as well. So that's what's kind of good about that. But I mean, you could always use like new cubes, and you can use box cutter. Sometimes you don't need anything super complicated, so you can just get in there and do like a chamfer. And I use bool tools a lot for this. So the trick with bool tools is if we had modifiers over here, like let's say we had a bevel modifier. Normally when you use bool tools by default, Control Shift B, auto booleans, difference or union, there's usually, you might have to set shortcuts up for it, but I use these shortcuts, and I'm going to do auto booleans are destructive, so I can do like a difference real fast, right? Using shortcuts. Now, bool tool behavior by default will apply a bevel, okay? Like it will do that every single time, and you'll get this result, okay? And lately I've been having issues with Blender applying or changing my settings. I don't know, something's wrong with 3.5 right now, but that was only with the latest update, so I don't know, maybe I can just reconfigure them. But if we go to add-ons, once you get extensions, bool tools is in there, right? And then once you get it, you can go to here, look for bool tools, and you'll see it applies all modifiers. You don't want that behavior. You don't even really want it to apply all your booleans necessarily. Sometimes you don't. So whoever makes this add-on and works on it probably should fix that, I think, where it can apply only on the one you do, perhaps. Now, only apply booleans until then. That's the best bet you got. So we'll do, usually I have that set, but for whatever reason, Blender updates, right? Now, so using the shortcut, I can just do subtraction destructively. I don't have to go through and finagle with this thing a whole lot. And you can see the bevel now is not applied, which is key because you could really screw up your mesh otherwise. Some of these add-ons will do that where they apply the dang modifiers when you don't want them to, and it's really annoying. But so, but anyways, yeah, all I was trying to do is get in here to just show you that you can just start doing that. Now, layering it up is really the key to everything. You just keep doing this process, guys, and making it more and more complex, more interesting. Keep using your knife cut if needed, or shapes, whatever the case. And I'm going to turn that off by tapping A twice. This wasn't quite in alignment. I saw that it was too far forward or backwards or something, but it'd be nice to just kind of get in here. I wish Blender had better measuring tool because this one's kind of annoying, but you could measure it if you really wanted to. I just eyeball it because I'm not trying to be super precise with everything on this, but you could extrude that. This whole top edge, you could just chamfer maybe, or maybe even this one. You don't have to chamfer every edge. That's the key to that. Like, just chamfer the ones that you think would work best. Okay. You can bevel some corners or edges. This one I don't think would bevel too well to that corner back there, so we only do like here. Maybe add a little bevel here or there, right? A little one, not that big. Use 2, 4, or 8, generally speaking, on these ones. It works out better. You can always dissolve these out too. I might leave the center connected, but I'll dissolve the other ones out. You can see it bevels a little bit different now. So yeah, you can do that. Shaded auto smooth. Auto smooth unpin. You add a weighted normal modifier on top of it. Keep sharp's face influence if you need to. But yeah, it's just going to weight the normals. It'll look nicer basically. So, and you have to have that bevel maybe to do some of that as well. Now, otherwise you'll have sharps everywhere. So it tends to work out. The bevel we can maybe increase to, I don't know, 2 segments or something. 4 even. So here's where we run into problem number 1. If we're baking something like this, we look at it with a normal back cap. Turn cavity off a second. You see how like a lot of these edges are very crisp. They're very hard to see. They're very, okay. That doesn't make a good normal matte bake. That's the big issue with that. You would want bigger bevels. And in our case, we have a clamp overlap on. And you would want bigger bevels because of that reason. But the way this is modeled, you can't really always pull that off. So you have to go through and manually bevel everything possibly, or use weighted bevels. It's a big nightmare scenario of a situation. This is why a lot of guys like to run off to ZBrush. They don't deal with that crap. They just Z-remesh it possibly, and it works out just fine. Blender, you have a hard time doing that kind of stuff. So and we possibly wouldn't want to do that in Blender either, unless you have quad remesher. But even then, you get questionable results out of that sometimes. So really trying to work things like to make them super complex. Like it's not a big issue to do that. You can do it, but it's going to require more work. Anytime you make things more complicated, it's going to take more work to clean them up and fix them and all that. So right now we're okay. Let's talk about splitting real quick. Splits are very simple. Let's say I want to split, we'll do a knife cut for it actually. Let's say I want to split, I'm going to do K and C and not angle snap it necessarily. Let's say I want to cut it all the way along this edge here. Okay. And I want to split it on that edge. Once you've created a loop, we went all the way through it by pressing K and C, right? We can do a chamfer. And a lot of guys will just delete that. They'll do it very small and they'll delete it. And that's how they create their separate objects. Now that might be good in some 3D modeling practices, but for me, that's not, because when you're doing a high to low bake, if you have any holes in your mesh, it creates a ray hit miss or whatever. It looks terrible. So what I like to do is something like this, but instead of chamfering it, I bevel it. And when I bevel, I mean, if I'm doing it manually, you could always try using solidify later on, and just literally right now we could select, and we could do select loops, boundary loop. Oh, excuse me, not select loops, boundary loops, select loops in a region. And we can select all of one side because it's a loop, right? Well, we could do that, but I found that it's also fun to sometimes do this where you do a Control B and you do a really small bevel, and you're going to mouse wheel up once to get that center edge. So the way this works is you bevel, you mouse wheel up, then you do Control number pad minus, and you select just the center edge there. Okay, but you're doing it very small where you wouldn't be able to select it. So it would be like Control B, you send it up a little bit, mouse wheel up once, select less. Now we have that loop inside. We can hit Alt S and scale or along normals or whatever, or shrink or flatten as they call it. And it pushes it in pretty much perfectly. So that's good. But we can still do the select loops in our region. So now we can separate that and have a holding edge on the outside, which is kind of fun if you want to try doing that. Now, does it always work perfectly? No. But a lot of times it works out pretty well. And so it's not something to be too messed up over. Also, you see this corner? This is going to be the outer emitter. Set it to arc. It works better with arc. Probably should have did that on this one as well. So, but now we got separation, and that's good. That's what we want, right? And we could continue to, slice this thing up into a bunch of different parts or pieces. Let's just do one more. We'll do here at the top. It's going to KCA this one. And then right here, I'll turn it off so that, there we go. Maybe we do a chamfer or a bevel. You can always do bevels as well. Just make sure they're higher segment counts than you probably think they should be. Because if you're going to quad remesh or voxel remesh or something like that, it can be quite problematic. And so you do have two choices. You can go to either of those, quad remesh or voxel. Or you can do a voxel and then quad remesh it after. So it's kind of an interesting little way of working maybe. So this one, once again, do the bevel. Oh, if it'll let me. It's doing vertices, that's why. Alt S and N selected. So we'll have that for now. And now if I just add some new colors to it, we'll use the same ones. And we'll leave that one brighter in the back. Actually, let's leave this one brighter and we'll switch those. So you have a choice to make like color scheming when you start splitting things up possibly, right? Maybe you split them up like that. So overall, not looking too bad. A lot of ways to go. It's like I was saying, this is a repetitious thing. You just keep working it. Doing the same exact techniques for the most part. That's the only key to it. You may still do like larger edits where you do bigger booleans, so you can incorporate something like this. This was just thrown on top of it. It's not like a combined piece right now. But for whatever reason, later on, let's say we wanted to sink this into the surface here. All you're going to do is create another cylinder possibly. Make it the appropriate resolution that you need. And you might try to set it up right here and put it in a position where it might work, where it's not clipping through the rest of the mesh. And you could always just Boolean subtract that. Like that's a possibility. The only issue we're going to run into possibly is this is a non-manifold mesh, and you can see the Boolean still worked. Usually it doesn't. So you might want to make this a solid piece before doing something like that, or do this before you separate it into the little panels and things. Things like that can come into play. So it's a little bit challenging sometimes, but it's definitely a Boolean. It worked barely, but it did. And so if you ever run into that issue where it doesn't work with the Boolean, try doing, you can see we got different methods. Try using a different method. Exact has hole tolerant as well, which can sometimes be very useful. So keep that in mind. Booleans do work on non-manifold mesh. They just are unpredictable sometimes if they're going to work out or not. That's the only thing I'm going to leave you with there. But now you can see how this starts to, maybe we could sink it further in if we needed to or whatever. You get the idea? So we can make our meshes in parts and pieces at a certain point, and you should do high and low poly pieces as separate parts and pieces or groups. And anyways, it just depends on how you want to arrange it. Like the high poly, you can break down into more subparts, generally speaking. The low poly you would make into groups that make logical sense for the game object. So it's little things like that. If you don't need groups, you don't use groups, right? It's more performant without them possibly, right? But in our case, we got this going. And so you keep doing this for all your detail, basically. Like you can just keep going crazy. You can do Booleans, all of it. You want to try to do them on solid objects though, Booleans, right? Okay, so where do you go from here? That's the real question. We got kind of another piece started up, which is nice. Grab the whole thing and just stick it here with these. And so where do you go from here? Well, the trick is, we will ignore that piece for a sec. You could do the bevel, and you could bake this to a lower poly model without a bevel, for example, sharp edges perhaps. You can make it a mid poly where you just do a chamfer and use it as the game model possibly, right? So one segment, weighted normals, or smooth my angle, weighted normals. Probably put that Boolean up top actually, but okay, like that, right? So this could be potentially a mid poly model is what I'm getting at. And somewhere between here, like it's too dense. There's too much stuff going on. There's too many edges. I mean, too many faces. We're going to want to do a decimate. Probably after the bevel. I'm going to take a guess. And we would do this one. Type in 0.05. And you could use it higher if you wanted to, but sometimes it makes things dissolve that you don't want to dissolve. But basically, this is the same as when you're in edit mode and you hit press X and you do a limited dissolve. That's what we're doing over here, basically. So it's the same idea. We can pretty much almost optimize it non-destructively is all I'm getting at here. So that decimate's really good. If it's a dense mesh, it might crash. Just keep that in mind. It does not like dense mesh always. Okay. And you work it into the correct area and it won't have as many issues generally speaking. So that with the shading and all that. So pretty smooth. And we could use that. We could use that as a game model if we wanted. It depends on the object you're creating, right? You use it as a high poly or a higher poly mesh to bake to a lower poly mesh. You might just want to increase some of those bevels so it looks nicer and increase the bevel size maybe. That's a possibility. This is just some ideas for you to kind of roll with maybe. And you can also quad remesh these things. In that case, we could maybe leave the Boolean or apply it or whatever. The bevel here, we won't use. The decimate we could, but we don't need it. We'll get rid of that boolean right now because we're not actually doing it. Smooth by angle is important. Weighted normal is not important. Okay, so here's the main thing is that we have lots of sharp edges. Box cutter, or excuse me, quad remesher has normal splitting option. This is going to make things that are sharp be kind of the guide to creating the mesh. So this could work out, but it might not work out very well. So we're going to try it. Let's just reset all the settings and use normal splits only. If we remesh with default settings, it's probably going to fail very bad or not look the way we want it. A lot of guys don't know how to use quad remesher. There's little tricks to it. Sometimes you have to prep the mesh beforehand before doing a quad remesh. And even then, sometimes you got to fix the mesh after doing a quad remesh. But usually you can find a useful result with enough fiddling around. But if you don't fiddle around with it enough and learn how to do it, it's not going to work out for you. So you have to spend time doing that. There's no way to get around that. In our case, we want to go across the y-axis so we can have symmetry. Symmetry helps quad remesher out quite a bit a lot of times. So we may want to apply our scale or our rotation depending on our object, what we're working on. And rotation in our case, so it makes sure symmetry works, right? And now we have all this going great. We can see we have shade auto smooth on. So, but the adaptive size here is kind of interesting. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. We're going to quad remesh it again. So what adaptive size does, and it's not really doing very well right now. Although that wasn't a bad remesh by the looks of it. It looks pretty good. Okay. That's probably one of the better ones you can get. Yeah, see, we might have to repair a corner. That happens. Like there's little areas that you might have to fix. But that's a pretty good result, actually. Here's the thing. Adaptive size, maybe if we do it heavier, let's do 20,000. And we remesh that. Okay. A lot of times these little errors like this might be a result of adaptive, but what it's doing is it's fluctuating the quad count up and down as it sees fit to try to maintain the geometry, but it also crams hard edges sometimes too. It's not doing it right now, or like curved edges, should I say. Yeah, sometimes it'll cram the curved edges a little bit. You can see it kind of almost occurring down here. It's kind of a poor example of it. Let's try adding a bevel first, okay? We're just going to increase the bevel count here. And then we'll quad remesh it. And watch what happens with this maybe. It might show it a little bit more. And of course it doesn't show it off very well. Yeah. See, this is a density increase here. It's trying to preserve something there, and I don't know exactly why it figures that edge it needs to preserve. That will do that as well. That adaptive size will do that, okay? So a lot of times I turn it off. I don't even use it. There's a way to do bevels like this as well that work out really well, but not with normal splitting. So I would turn it off, set it at a higher density usually. So if you were at like 100,000 and remeshed it, you get a really dense mesh, right? But if you're baking, I mean, what's the point of going low poly, right? But we still get errors. That's always the case with this add-on. Like it's almost always going to have errors somewhere, somehow, some way. And you'll have to fix those if you want to use this, unless you can get it to quad remesh in a better manner. But in general, it's not too bad. We could potentially utilize that, and now we could like sculpt on it, do all kinds of crazy stuff with like a multi-res or something. And even this little area over here, as terrible as it looks, as long as we're not sculpting in that area, we would be fine. But I don't like that result either. I think it's too high poly. So that's another thing you run into quite a bit, is that you'll have something like this, and you got to find like a quad count that works for it sometimes. That first one was obviously really good, but maybe it wasn't dense enough. If it's not dense enough, you can't have as sharp of an edge, right? And what I like to do is turn symmetry off a lot of times and let it kind of do its thing, because sometimes one side will come out better than the other, and then I'll just symmetrize it over. I think that works out pretty well sometimes. Other times it gives you like the same result. So it's like, you can see maybe not the best result. But a lot of times I go to sculpting off these anyways. So it's not like I need a perfect, as you would think of a perfect subdivision mesh, because I could just do that very fast. And then, go on to the next one. And take this one and just say, remesh it with basically the same settings maybe. So they're usable is what I'm getting at here. Like we can, in fact, do this, what is going on over here? I had something hidden apparently. That's what it was. Duplicate that one over. Remesh. That one probably does not need that count. I'd say 500,000 is a lot anyways, right? So yeah, you could definitely go less than that. It doesn't need to be that high. You get weird issues sometimes though if you're not careful. That's because it's shaded smooth. And so because we're using normal splits, we can mark sharps as well. And by doing that, when it remeshes, it should hold that edge better. You see? Maybe not soft now, but same issue over here. So use sharps, like actual mark sharps is useful for guiding things around for these types of pieces. But these will all subdivide now, at least to some degree. Super sharp subdivision on it because it's so dense. And if we ever run into like weird issues with shading and stuff, we might be able to fix it with some sculpting tools. Like turn that subdivision off real quick. We might be able to get in here and use like the slide relax tool to kind of work something out. A lot of times that just, it doesn't happen. Like the smooth tool, you might be able to work that out with the smooth tool and kind of work it if I'm on the right object. I'm not even on the right object. I'll cue to it. So you can see like smooth tool could possibly work, but it's going to mess up your shading a bit. Slide relax is actually kind of interesting because it will, if you work in the directions of the topology kind of back and forth, it kind of works out quite well. It will soften edges, so you got to be careful. But you can go right up to them and you can see what I'm doing. I'm just shifting it around and it's trying to preserve the volume. For whatever reason, that tends to work pretty well. It's not too bad of a technique. And then so ultimately, you know, we bake this into a normal map at some point, right? And you look at it and you'd say like, oh, okay, great. But we can do things like mesh filter preserve boundary. We can do mesh filter smooth. We can always soften all of this if we need to. Maybe it's too sharp. We need to soften it a bit. You see? Get rid of that subdivision first. We can do this with multi-res as well. And so now we end up with, do we even need to subdivide that at this point? It's pretty strong, right? We can end up with a really good solid base for baking later. You see? So when we compare this to say, let's go back to object here. There you go. Compare this to my first one, which I believe is still ingons, yeah, and bevels. You know, we can get a solid result out of this. We really can. None of those have been like fully remeshed perhaps, but you get the idea. Quad remesher is a lifesaver in this sense. Because if we just try to run bevels, and we can't have like that control on those edges a little bit where we can soften them. Like, of course we could try to smooth this, but it's not going to smooth as well as this one, right? So we end up in this situation where they're not too dissimilar though. This beveled pretty nice, believe it or not. Sometimes it doesn't go that way because you have really small intersection areas and it doesn't work out that well, but we can definitely sculpt on this one easier than this one. So we can add edge damage and stuff like that if we needed to. Like you want to get in here and just do some scraping or whatever. I mean, that's on us now. We can just do whatever. We don't have to remesh it. We don't have to go to like dynamic topology or whatever. When you're sculpting and you have a subdivision, just turn use deform only on. So it won't use the regular subdivision over there while you're doing this. And Alt Q to the right object again. I guess I did that twice now. Huh? There you go. So I got the group selected or something. And I don't like the normal mat cap at all, so we're going to go back. So yeah, if we need edge damage on this, and we don't want to do that in like substance, obviously. Certain things you don't want to do in substance, I think, edge damage. Although you can do it, and plenty of guys do. I think I'd rather sculpt it, to be honest. But you can just knock in those little details here or there, scratches or bigger edge, damage pieces perhaps, or whatever. We can refine this thing to such a high level now, it's ridiculous. And we shouldn't have any gaps as well. That's the main thing we're looking for. We don't want gaps anywhere. Otherwise you get those ray misses. You can paint them out in Photoshop technically, but it's better not to do that. So ultimately we end up with our object at a higher resolution. A little bit of a tedious process. Takes a lot of time to learn how to do this, but it definitely is a possibility for you. So now you won't have any questions on this kind of thing, right? Hopefully you can make high poly models, hard surface models in Blender, mind you. This isn't exactly hard surface sculpting per se. Like some guys were wanting a hard surface sculpting video. This is still, I guess, technically hard surface sculpting, but it's more to do with modeling than trying to, and a lot of times hard surface sculpting in Blender works this way, where it's more to do with that modeling than it is to do with sculpting. Think of sculpting as an extension of your modeling tools. That's really all it is. So it's not like it's a bespoke, like its own way of working that you only use, right? It's in combination with all your modeling tools. You use it. So it works better when you start thinking of it in that manner anyways. And you run into a little bit less problems with it. So, all right. Now, with all that out of the way, yeah, every one of these started this way, right? They could all be remeshed. I remeshed this one earlier. It worked fine. This one worked fine. This one now we just did. It also works fine. So very high density, unfortunately, but 100,000, 200,000, not uncommon. Whatever this issue is here, I have a feeling we could figure that out. It probably had something to do with the little triangle there that we created, or the little angles here. Like a chamfer in here might have helped it, or marking some sharp edges or something. Maybe pulling this thing down a little bit somehow right before it goes over the edge. Little things like that, prepping for those errors can be really, really useful sometimes. And at worst case scenario, you redo that manually real quick and patch it. But in our case, we'll just leave it for the video. But yeah, I mean, it works, guys. Sick, right? So we'll do more videos in the future on hard surface sculpting and maybe baking things like this too. Really, baking just comes down to holding the silhouette of the shape and having the low match the high to some degree. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's actually a lot easier than you probably realize to bake something like this to a low poly model. So, because it's basically the same thing, almost like you're just going to create a model around it that matches and is UV mapped. So, and then you can do this as a separate piece. You don't have to combine everything necessarily, right? So I'll see you in the next one, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Take care, all right?